A warm welcome to Business Daily right here on Trust Television. I am Yusuf Akogu. Let's take the business top stories. Glad to have you back. Now we quickly go to the stock market to give you a highlight of the stock trading as it went down yesterday. The market closed positive 0.34%. It closed the volume of trade 360.6 million, value at 6.610 billion naira in a days of 6,579 the exchange hands among investors. The market, the all-share index added about 262 basis points yesterday to close at 71,284,000.56 basis points on Wednesday. Let's look at the top gaining equities. The top gaining equities, we have a Seplat. The oil and gas sector is back on the trading table. 10% it gained to close at 2,310 naira.10 kobo per share. May and Becker closing positive as well, 9.79% to close at 3 naira 59 kobo per share. And of course, Suno Assurance also closing positive 9.56% to close at 1 naira and 49 kobo per share. We look at the top losing equities quickly. Guinea's Insurance down at minus 10% there to close at 27 kobo per share. Of course, Omatech in the software segment of the market, 9.88% negative to close at 73 kobo, I beg your pardon, per share. Of course, Abibet also down 9.68% to close at 1 naira and 68 kobo. Quickly, we look at the activities table to see the banking sector dominating trading tables there, 56.69% from Guaranty Trust Bank Holdings, the mother company of Jitco. Of course, Transcorp is also there, 27.4 million volume of shares. And of course, United Bank for Africa doing 21.4 million volume of shares as well. Let's look at the sectorial performance as we saw on Wednesday. Is down. The market sector is down 0.56%. The industrial sector closed flat. The consumer good index is up 0.89%. Of course, the oil and gas sector, the biggest gainer, 6.06%. Of course, apparently driven by the performance of the Seplat Petroleum. Of course, the insurance sector also gained 1.17%. Let's look at the rest of Africa. Of course, it's red today. Yesterday it was green. It has tumbled today. We see Joburg is down 0.46%. In Ghana, it's down 0.06%. And of course, in Kenya, Nairobi Stock Exchange is down 0.13%. These are the highlights of the stock trading as it went down on Wednesday across various markets in Africa. We're going to go on a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to look at the budget, to 27.5 trillion naira budget that was presented to the joint session of the National Assembly yesterday by President Bola Tinubu. Don't go away. Glad to have you back. It's the Business Daily right here on Trust Television. Of course, we're looking at the budget that was presented yesterday to this joint session of the National Assembly. 27.5 trillion naira was presented yesterday by President Bola Tinubu. Today, we'll look at the key assumptions and, of course, the estimates in that budget. I have joining me in the studio a business and financial consultant, Mr. Adeboyega Adebajo. Glad to have you here.
Thanks. It's good being here.
All right. And on Zoom as well, from Abuja here, I have Dr. Emeka Okengwu. He's a development economist. We'll get him to join the conversation shortly. Let me start with you, Mr. Adebajo. 27.7 trillion naira budget. Should we be excited?
I don't know if that's the right question in terms of talking about excitement. But yes, it's a figure that has jumped up at us. Definitely there are details behind it. The greatest concern of everyone is we're now conscious of the debts that exist for the country, and everyone is like, how much of that is going to be borrowed money? And so that's the concern. So it's not so much about excitement, it's about, even if we borrowed money, the most important thing is that the money is used in such a way that it impacts the economy and we see the positive growth. And I think generally that's the plan of the budget. Borrow the money, execute the plans in there, particularly the sectors that have been identified as critical, and create the desired impact at the end of 12 months. But will that happen? We have 12 months to find out.
Absolutely. Leave that to the implementers of the budget.
Yes.
Absolutely. Now, let's look at some of the key assumptions in that budget. If we can have the graphics on the screen, we see the crude oil price pegged at $78 per barrel. Crude oil production, 1.78 million barrels per day. The GDP growth, specifically I'm concerned about that, is pegged at 3.76%. At exchange rate, 750 naira to the US dollar. Inflation rate 21.4%. And of course, when you look at the GDP projection, less than 5%. And this government is a government that is planning to have a $1 trillion economy in the, before it leaves office. A GDP of a projection of 3.76%. Is it possible for us to achieve this $1 trillion economy with this budget?
I think the government is right in being cautious, because when you talk about $1 trillion and you're looking at the rate of growth being relatively low, put that against the background that the World Bank has actually reduced the growth rates, its growth expectations globally of Africa, although sub-Saharan Africa increases slightly. But the expectations also are that when you look at last year, we didn't achieve the GDP growth expected. So I think the government is somehow being cautious, whilst at the same time being ambitious. And so it's a target, and it's a good enough target. If we can do 3% and 3.5, we will definitely exceed what growth we experienced this year. The figures that are currently out are for the 9 months to September, and we are currently at about 2.8% growth of GDP. If that is achieved, then I think we can do slightly over 3%. I wouldn't want to say totally about 3.75, but it will be a good mark we will get to.
All right, let's look at another graphic again to look at the sectorial allocation for that budget. Let's see what is given to defense. Look at the let's look at sectorial allocation. Education 2.2 trillion, health 1.33 trillion, security 3.2 trillion, infrastructure 1.32 trillion, student loans 700 billion. Of course, social development and poverty reduction is being allocated 534 billion US dollar there. If you look at the comparison now, look at in 2022, look at what was allocated to security. 2023 and of course 2024. In 2022, you see 2.29 trillion, 2.78 trillion in 2023, and of course 3.2 trillion in 2024. If you look at it down to education, of course up to health, there is some slight increase from what we are having in this 2024 appropriation bill. Do you think this budget, given what we have seen, will actually help this government achieve its economic development plan?
There's something we must have at the back of our minds as we start. So this is a draft budget. It still hasn't been turned into the appropriation bill yet, so those numbers are going to change. As we move closer to the end of the fiscal year, December 31st, 2023, we will start to see and understand what actual figures are and what percentage performances there are regarding those figures for 2023 in particular. Would the budget have been achieved in terms of 100% of expenditure? I do not think so. Inflation, of course, is a factor. And so every year you would expect a slight increase. But I feel what's striking to me is that, as usual, we have defense taking a significantly higher. When I say significantly higher, perhaps it's education is at 7.9% of the budget, this draft budget, and defense is at 12%. So that's about 4%, about 50% more than what there is in education.
All right.
But we all understand the challenges of insecurity in the country. And when we say insecurity, most people think of the Northeast and the Northwest, but we're forgetting that most of our oil is not really secured. And for this reason, we're not able to achieve the production of barrels estimated in the budget. This is also a place where security needs to come into play. Because if we can, at least to some extent, produce enough of the barrels, and the global prices are right, perhaps the amount of money we need to borrow will reduce. So security is a main thing in the country. I think it's something we need to deal with. But that's not saying education and health should be relegated. They're also primary.
All right, I'm told that Dr. Emeka Okengwu is ready for us on Zoom. Good morning, Dr. Okengwu.
Yeah, good morning. How are you, Akogun?
I'm very well. Now, let's look at the debt, the amount voted for debt servicing. This is about, let's look at the deficit, the budget deficit first, 9.18 trillion naira there. That's about 3.88% of our GDP there as debt, as budget deficit. This will have to be financed through multilateral, bilateral, of course, borrowing. Do you think with the current debt profile, we are actually ready to actually go into that?
Well, I thought you also looked at, the amount allocated to debt repayment, which is about 8.25. So you just want to talk about the budget deficit. Yes. I mean, budgets always have deficits. That won't be the issue. The source of funding, would also not be an issue as long as they are going to be program-based or project-based. You can borrow against projects. There is nothing wrong, with borrowing. There's nothing wrong with borrowing heavily. More so when you have an economy that is about 30%, our GDP to our debt now is about 30%. Well, but that's the formal economy. Let's not get into that statistics. I think the way we are now is that we must also look at the other aspect of our nationhood, which is the real sector, which is where a lot of Nigerians are living. So we can, with proper management, reschedule our debts. We can, with proper management, manage our budget deficits. It depends on where we're putting our exposures on.
All right, let's look at the key priority areas now by this government. They talk about national defense and, of course, internal security, job creation, macroeconomic stability, human capital development, poverty reduction, and, of course, social security. Is it like an old narrative where government come up with key priority areas and at the end of it, nothing is addressed?
Well, these are generics, if you may. But for me, would have been able to reorder it. These are things you must see in any budget. Okay, but it is not the ordering that will make the difference. I should have thought that instead of putting national security vis-a-vis the army and the air force and the other security agencies, would have put food security as top priority. Considering that you have statistics are reporting about 20 to 24 million people, might not be able to afford food in the next 6 or 3 months going forward. I thought the second thing will be not just social inclusion or social security the way it is put in the budget vis-a-vis cash transfers and support to what they have called the vulnerable people. I thought would have also put, the development of human capital, because the president, was very emphatic when he was talking about job-rich economy. When you're talking about a job-rich economy, you're talking about the economy that is driven by skill sets. And he talked, of course, about human capital development. But I didn't also see a lot of mention of mining and the mineral resources and other natural resources. I saw that we are still fixated on oil, which I think we should be slowly, quickly, hastily exiting from. I think with the other natural resources we have in our country, oil shouldn't be playing such a very prominent role. Now that, yes, we need revenue, as it were, but we need more of the sectors that can be able to engage people and create social inclusion as much too.
All right, let me come to the studio, Mr. Adebajo. One of the consequences of borrowing is hyperinflation. Given our current position now, do you think we are at that level where the citizens have lost faith in government?
Well, you really can't legislate sentiments, and you cannot determine or say that a particular action may not evoke a certain emotion in people. But like we just heard, there is no way you're going to run the country without spending. And if you don't have all the resources available to yourself, you're going to have to borrow. One fantastic thing that has happened is the mention by the CBN governor that CBN is going to focus on its core mandates.
And the orthodox monetary policy.
Exactly. And that's certainly going to mean that someone is keeping an eye on inflation and all the indices that work with them. And hopefully, as we go through the year, the necessary indices and the metrics will be tweaked to ensure that we do not find ourselves in a situation of hyperinflation. And I think that's one thing you will find that the CBN is going to be able to do.
All right, let's look at even the size of the budget and, of course, compare it with the rest of countries in Africa. If you look at Nigerian budget, 27.5 trillion naira, it appears so huge when you quantify it in naira. But when you convert it to US dollar, by the parallel market rate, it's just about $24 billion. By the official rate is about 34 billion US dollars for a country of 213 million people. Is that enough? When you compare to South Africa with 59 million in terms of population, they have a budget of $132 billion.
People always say the devil is in the details. And I guess when you talk about the absolute figure and then you're starting to look at the populations, that's the first thing to look at in terms of per capita and what it takes. The other nuances there is that I'm pretty sure the government would have wanted to do a lot more than what you see in the budget. But there are constraints. And here we are questioning, do we have to borrow? And whilst there's some of us who have a school of thought that it's okay to borrow as long as the funds are used to create the necessary impact. Some already feel that we've borrowed too much. Let's just tighten our belts and stay as we are. But the truth is we cannot, because sometimes you find yourself in the circumstances which we are. Infrastructure is required, security must be dealt with, education must continue and be improved, health needs to be provided, and then the social sector, we're starting to see a specific allocation, 2% of the budget this time, to social development and poverty eradication. He spoke about food security. That's also an essential part of it, and it's going to bring out money through agriculture, the Ministry of Agriculture. We're going to see activities and initiatives towards food security. So at the end of the day, money needs to be spent to deal with the things we have. Is it enough? It's never enough, but it's a plan. I see that the budget includes a 2024 to 26 sort of framework plan, fiscal framework plan. And that shows you that the government is thinking long term, which is essential. In economics, there tends to be a lag between cause and effect. And in the same way, between when you take an action and when the impact of the action is felt. And so some of the things being done in the 2024 budget may not be felt in 2024. But the important thing is to ensure that the conditions persist and are ambient to allow those activities create the impact that's desired.
Exactly, especially at this time, Nigeria need that impact
exactly.
Seriously. Dr. Okengwu, if you're there, let's look at the a lot of issues that have been raised now by some concerned economists. I listened to Professor Charles Soludo, the governor of Anambra State, and of course the former CBN governor. He did say that this government, the current government, inherited a dead or a near dead economy that is going to take a whole lot of work for us to get stability. Now, with that kind of statement or coming from somebody like that who has been in the CBN before, who know the working of the system and of course the economy, do you think this size of budget that we have will have a significant impact on the economy that has been described as a near dead economy?
Well, I think it's important to say that this is not the first time Soludo is making that pronouncement of dead economies and living economies. He also said that when Jonathan was in government. For me, it's taking it a little bit too far. Okay, the people in the saddle haven't told you that the economy is dead. And the economy can only be dead when the human beings in that economy is dead, because, I mean, it is your human, factor that makes you an economy. We are, yes, struggling like every other, country in the world. There has been COVID, there has been recession, there has been the Ukrainian and Russian war. There is now recently the Israeli-Palestinian war too. So all these factors, has impacted very negatively on the global supply chain. Now, but 200, 300 dams in Nigeria haven't stopped producing water, so we can be dead. Okay, if we were dead, Soludo won't be doing what it is that he's doing in Anambra State, except he's also saying that since he became governor, he's just folded his hands. So that's truly and thoroughly not a first thing. And I hope he was misquoted or quoted out of context. Now, having said that, the government has said, we've looked at the issues. This is a government, remember, in continuation as it were. Okay, the president has always reiterated that he's going to continue from where his predecessor stopped. So it's an indictment on the APC if you're saying that the government is dead. Maybe bankrupt, maybe broke, yes. And that's why I keep saying to you that the first thing I think we should do, or what the government should have done, is to be able to do a technical audit or an audit of what had happened in the past. And then let's have a clear pathway of who did what. Because the last government, you remember, went out claiming that they were the best that's happened to Nigeria in the past 8 years. So there seems to be two scenarios now that we need to reconcile. So I think this government should come out and then be able to clearly put a statement against what the Soludo is saying. If I really did, then APC needs to do more than some explanation to the whole Nigeria. But if they're not, and I don't think they are, then I think what we should do is to start looking at the plan program of actions to be able to get the economy back on its feet again. And that's why I said to you, instead of national security taking that chunk of money, I thought that food security, accelerated food production, should have come. Okay, because part of why you have this level of insecurity is also because people are hungry. People don't have anything they're doing. So if you're able to go to those sectors, and that's what I'm saying to you, that the focus on the oil and gas sector is also not very, very good for us. We should be looking at, the other facets that can be able to take much more people, than the oil sector that can take less than 2 or 3% and is shrinking.
All right.
So that's what.
All right, Dr. Okengwu, let me come back to the studio now and give Mr. Adeboyega Adebajo at least 60 seconds to, tell us how we can actually, have a synergy between the fiscal and, of course, the monetary authority. One of the problems the last administration had was that lack of synergy, but now we are seeing that there is that coordination is coming in now. How much of this do you think will impact on the general economic growth?
I think, first of all, you're absolutely right that there was a misalignment in the past. One expects, seeing as how the team has been put together, that there will be greater synergy, particularly with the CBN focusing on what it knows how to do best and what it intends to do best. Whilst we're speaking fiscal, the fiscal economy. Another thing that's key in the budget is to create the infrastructure to be able to generate domestic revenue. Widen the tax net and all that income generation domestically. That's a key part. That's going to grow. It's going to get wider. Government is deliberate about that. And I expect, seeing the kind of professionals in both areas, that there will be an alignment in terms of what direction they're pushing the economy.
All right. Adeboyega Adebajo, business and financial consultant. I must thank you for your time on business.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate your contribution. And of course, Dr. Emeka Okengwu, a development economist. I also thank you for your thought on the show today. We appreciate your time as well.
Thank you.
All right. With that is a wrap on the show today. We'll be back again tomorrow. I am Yusuf Akogun.